We are good to go.
Hello.
Well, hello
Welcome.
again.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
Welcome back to another episode of Off the Clock Conversations with Lili and Lauren.
Today, what are we talking about?
I think we're gonna follow up and follow up a previous recording and talk about social rules.
Yes, I love it. So, what are these social rules that you speak of?
Ooh, they're all the rules that we wish we didn't have and we tell society we shouldn't have.
Hmm.
And all the rules that I think we just create for ourselves of all the social rules. I don't know. What do you think? What are social rules?
Social rules are what we realize that we have when we walk into a situation and we have no idea what the fuck is going on. Have you ever walked into a room and just been like, I'm completely underdressed for this occasion?
Oh my God, yes. So
And
many times.
it's like viscerally uncomfortable because you're like, oh, and I'm wearing sweatpants, and they're like, other people are like black tie. I so my sister, like while back, my sister invited me to a barbecue. And when I think barbecue, the social rules are like it's pretty, like it's free, like you can kind of say whatever you want. It seems relaxed. It was like her husband's grad school friends. So I'm thinking this feels chill.
Yeah.
I'm wearing like ripped Toms that aren't even mine. They're my sister's. I'm wearing like sweatpants and like a hoodie.
I'm
And I don't even usually dress like that. I was just like, it's a
gonna say,
barbecue.
that's my outfit. That's like an outfit I would wear.
Yeah. And I was like, that's what I think of when I think of barbecue. I think of certain social rules, like we should bring some like hot dogs or something.
Yes.
I don't think we brought hot dogs. That seems like a weird choice, but
I
I
would
just like
believe
carry
you
them
the
with me.
sweet steak at this
Yeah.
barbecue.
But we get to the barbecue and it's black tie.
Did your
It
sister
was no,
know?
no, nobody knew.
Mm. See, I think this is how people feel. If you've ever been to a Persian or Armenian, and I think like just overall Middle Eastern or Eastern European wedding,
Mhm.
non-Middle Eastern and Eastern Europeans feel walking into one of these weddings because there are so many times at these weddings people come with like a nice, like simple black dress where everybody else is like red carpet ready.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm. Yeah.
you don't know that's so those are the social rules and not specifically that, but even day to day, I think one of the things that's really interesting to me, especially living in LA, we
Mhm.
have a lot of different social rules
Yes.
because we are so like so many cultures and so many different not only cultures but different generations and different cultures live in one place.
Yes.
So like walking to Chinatown versus like walking in Westwood. Like Westwood is like Persianville, right? And then walking in Chinatown, it's Chinatown. And then walking in Koreatown, like the whole entire environment and the rules of how to walk and what to do tend to change.
Yeah. Yeah, all of these different spaces. And it's hard to keep up sometimes with what the expectations are in different spaces. And I think it's such an interesting concept because sometimes you don't know until you get there that it's going to be different. Sometimes you can kind of plan ahead. Like you kind of know that the way that you act at home is going to be different than the way you act on public transportation.
Hmm?
And you kind of know that the way you act in front of your in-laws is going to be different from the way you act in front of your friends. And so we start to see those kind of differences emerge, which is I think helpful. We kind of know different contexts. We know what work should look like, maybe. But then there are these like micro cultures as well.
Yes. Yes, and I think this is one of the biggest pieces. Like the thing that I see with those that have a hard time adjusting and adapting to those microcultures, it's because like it's uncomfortable when you walk into a place and you're kind of doing what your social norm rule tells you to do, and another person's like, that's not how we do things here. And you're like, well, that's how I do things because I don't want to, I'm going to like just be like, no, it's the way I do it, so I'm not going to adapt. That is the biggest ineffective problem that tends to happen with humanity because the lack of curiosity goes away because the ego kicks in of like, I made a mistake and you called me out on my mistake. And I didn't know that this was a mistake, but I don't like it that you called me out. And so I think one of the things that, and a lot of times with my clients, I talk about these a lot and talk about social rules a lot because they'll be like, well, my boss said something and I didn't like it. So I talked back and I said this. And I'm like, okay, but how did you do it?
Mhm.
Because there isn't something against speaking up to your boss, but there's a social rule there that
Mhm.
just, and if your boss called you out on something that you did, you can't get reactive and defensive and say, I don't like what you said, so I quit. Like, you have to, you have to learn to effectively regulate yourself and listen and then learn the social rule.
Mhm.
Um, which I think it's something that we actually, as a society, and I don't know if I'm overgeneralizing or not, but I think we really do lack. Why am I
Like,
going
what
through
just
what?
happened? It just For those of you who can't see us right now, Lily just started fireworks started emerging from Lily's head on this Zoom call. And I was having the thought, I was like, I don't know. I feel like I'm missing something now about this context. Like, are we like doing this? Like, are we saying Happy New Year? Um,
Last time we did this over Zoom, I had a thumbs up randomly. I thought you did it.
hands off. All right.
Anyway, but yeah, I think I don't know. What do you think? What do you think when you look at how we as a society adjust to social rules on a day, micro social rules on a day-to-day basis?
I think it can be really hard. And I think it can be anxiety provoking of not really being certain about what the expectations are in different spaces. And of course, like what I aim to do in this is I aim to be curious, like you were talking about, to have curiosity, to observe with other people. And of course, I don't want to always feel like I have to wait and see. And there are some situations where it does make sense to do that. Like there might be, I might generally kind of know how to be in the world and feel comfortable, but this is really about each individual's comfort, right? My own comfort, the comfort of a community. And so it depends on how we think about it as like individuals and as community members of wanting to make sure how I'm entering a space makes other people comfortable, makes myself comfortable. But I'm usually just trying to avoid feeling terribly embarrassed.
Yeah.
That's my usual goal. Like as somebody with social anxiety, I'm like trying not to make a scene. And so things like walking down the street, and a social norm is probably like when you and your dog walk past another dog, you kind of like pull your dog to make sure that it doesn't attack another dog.
Mhm.
One of my dogs, Lolo, barks incessantly whenever she sees another dog. I've tried everything that I possibly can. This is me wrangling her to get her to not do that, and she can't. And so I always feel a little bit uncomfortable when we're walking down the street. And there are those like kind of norms where you're like trying to be quiet, trying to like keep things one of, and then there are some social norms that you may or may not care about or abide to. And a lot of these things is like, do I have buy-in to this situation, to these circumstances? One of them, when I was commuting to school, like in the city from Connecticut, there was like an unwritten rule that you cannot speak
Mhm.
during rush hour on these trains, and I didn't know that. And I
Oh.
used to get in so much trouble with everybody on the train. I'd be like, "What is with these people? It's not a quiet car." And I just didn't know, and it's not something no one said anything, and I was like, "Maybe I could have picked up on the fact that no one was speaking at any point." Sometimes you don't pick up on that, and it's a little confusing.
Mhm. I think that's the piece where it's finding that dialectic, the middle path.
Yes.
And especially like I'm loving more and more. Like I go to the theater. I went to Barnes and Noble to buy one book when I came out with like six, and Barnes and Noble was packed, Lauren, like a long line, which I had not seen it like that. It made my heart so happy because I was just like, well, society's back out into the world.
Yeah.
Yay! We've officially COVID is gone. Like the time where no one
Yeah.
left the house and didn't come out, it's gone. We're back out. We're back into living and existing out with the rest of the world. But which is then, of course, I'm at the Grove,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm like, okay, well, like, bro, like, I'm don't stop pushing me. Stop.
Yeah.
So like society's rules and norms, everyone's just kind of doing their own thing. So we're back to that, which is nice.
Yeah.
And finding the dialectic between there are certain rules that like certain norms you're not going to know the rules and you just kind of go with the flow and let it go. Right?
Yes.
Like, participate effectively is my favorite skill when I'm out and about. And even like the example of Lolo, like to me, like every time someone complains, like, oh my God, look at that small dog complaining. I'm like, actually, that's the dog's social norm. The dog is literally like another animal that can harm me. I need
Mm-hmm.
to warn people of the other animal. So, like, the dog's doing what it's supposed to do. Like, just because it's small and yappy doesn't mean that you get to judge it, but it's finding that middle path, right? How to find the middle path of learning the rule and adjusting and adapting to a certain sense. And then some of it, you just let it go.
Yeah. And it's interesting the intersections of that, of like thinking about conforming and like to different moments. And I think having acceptance over the differences that like show up of like, yeah, Lolo barks. It's really hard to be small. That's what I talk to her about a lot. It's very hard to be a small little dog. And there are other moments where I think that there are a lot of intersections with power, privilege, and those kind of dynamics that show up of like other people trying to um like control other people's behavior to like fit a certain standard that maybe doesn't fit anymore.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing where I can say, and my experience, at least living in LA and seeing it more and more in LA, is that doesn't, thankfully, we're not buying into that anymore, nor are we angry at it. We're just like ignoring that. Like you can say what you want, but you are officially the minority with your ridiculous opinion. So I'm sorry. Like, done. We're not fitting into the box that you think the world should fit into. And on the other end, I think there's that statement of should. Like even me saying like you think you shouldn't think for us to fit into that box. Right? And it's the same thing. It's the same behavior that like one of the things I want to work on is just kind of saying you're you, have your opinion, and you like I like most of our society doesn't agree with you. So your rule does not fit into most of society's rules.
Exactly. This like when I was working at like a hospital, I was like we had to go over like the house rules of like basically like how to the social norms and
Yeah.
like what the expectations were in the space. And one of the clients came over to me and was like, I don't think that you should go over the rules. And I was like, why? Like I was like, is it like bad time? And they were like, I don't think people are going to take it seriously coming from a woman.
Oh,
And I was like, okay. Like I hadn't like and there it was. Like there it was. I was like kind of, thinking about and I think you're right. Like I think there's been a lot of efforts and movements and like seeing that, like having that be so loud. And I was like, well, I'm what you've got. So it looks like I'm gonna be doing it. Looks like we're gonna have to start listening to women. And I don't think my vagina makes it impossible for people to listen to me. I haven't triple checked though. I'll definitely ask. I'll get feedback on that later. But sometimes there is a piece of that. And it's interesting thinking about kind of all of those things and the ways in which I think AFAB people who are assigned female at birth, maybe have been socialized to think that their voices aren't going to be heard or the expectations. And so there's a lot of different things at play, thinking about the person in context. And there are obviously different kind of things that I can't even speak to kind of with my own privileges of, right? What would it be like to walk in as a person of color, thinking about those other things that I can't speak to. But I definitely like kind of as we're talking about this, it's like impossible to think about social rules, norms without thinking about the other kind of aspects of identity that come into play in different spaces.
Yeah. And I think for me, and again, like I'm olive brown, so I'm a sense of a color, but not necessarily like there are different levels, right? So as someone that's in the middle level of color, where I've had a balance of having the privilege and a balance of being told I don't belong here
Mhm.
or I should go back to my home country where I'm like, está aquí. Like, it's like, right here,
Welcome.
sir. But having that balance, what I've learned is really being able to just kind of be like, I really don't like, I don't care about your opinion.
Yeah.
And what I can do to make sure that I'm still like within my grounds of being respected and appreciated or whatever, taking care of myself is there are certain rules that I will abide by. There are
Hmm.
certain disciplinary actions, the way I speak, the way I carry myself in a social setting with strangers out in the world, the way I handle certain things I will still abide by those rules, but I'm not going to let someone belittle me either. So
Yeah.
for me, that's been kind of my middle path of like, there's social norms that I have to follow. Everyone has to follow. It doesn't matter the color of the skin that you live in. You have to follow it. Doesn't matter whether you have a vagina or a penis. Social rules you have to follow, right?
Yeah.
And I'll go even that extra mile of being a little more polite and a little more soft and a little more kind, which I don't mind. I think it's just a more well-behaved human being. Like,
Yeah.
I'm cool with that. But if you come to me and tell me something because you don't like whatever it is that I'm doing, whether it's me being loud, because we're Middle Eastern, that's the one thing we always get complaints about. Like, you're so loud. It's like, yeah, loud with joy, and I'm not going to let you shut that down because you don't like it and you think you're superior. You're no longer superior. You don't give that power. It's
And that's
interesting.
it is. And I think that it's as you're like, it's all these extra thoughts that go into different situations before you've even walked into a room, like of being able to cope ahead in some ways for the things that you may encounter and be like, this is what I'm okay with doing, and this is what is going to cross a line for me.
Yeah, and this is where, and how do I want to handle that crossing the line? Still following the social norms of how I want to handle the crossing the line. Because at the end of the day, and the one thing I am really, really grateful is in comparison to like 30 years ago or 20 years ago to where we are today, I am a lot safer and a lot more comfortable and able to stand up for myself without being harmfully punished, at least in Los Angeles and in California.
Hmm.
That's the place that, so for that, I can say I'm grateful for that. And I will still stand up for myself within social rules.
Yeah.
I'm not going to overdo it, but I get to stand up for myself now because I have that right. And that right has not been taken away from me, but thankfully has been fought for me.
Yeah.
I'm privileged that way.
Hmm. Well, I'm glad we started this conversation. I think that there's probably another episode in here about power and privilege.
I think so too.
But for today, that's it. That's all we've got.
That's all we got. Welcome back to another episode of Off the Clock Conversation. I hope you enjoy conversations between Lauren and I. We enjoy it. So they're
Same
just
here.
going to keep coming every Thursday because we are enjoying
Yeah.
this. Happy Thursday.
Bye, guys.
Bye.